Hello, I'm Captain Jack and welcome to the Hangar Bay. On this channel, we take a deep dive into the best starships, technology, and more from your favourite sci-fi universes. Today, we're talking about the Nebula-class Starship from the Star Trek universe. This type of ship was in service to Starfleet and the United Federation of Planets during the second half of the 24th century. Like many designs from this era of Star Trek, the design is made through a process of what we call kit bashing. This involves taking parts from other Starship designs, such as the Galaxy class in this case, and making a new Starship class out of them. Today, we explore the budget Galaxy class Starship, but we leave you with this question while you watch. Would you rather command a Galaxy class or a Nebula class Starship? Remember, for the latest videos, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Let us know what you think of this ship in the comments below. The Nebula class is a 24th century Federation affiliated starship. A fishing explorer type, it proved to be one of the ultimate multi-mission vessels in Starfleet. It was covert, scientific, and tactical, and the Nebula could easily adapt to any given task. Construction of the Galaxy's little sister was spearheaded under the authority of the Yoyodyne Division, and their construction dates range from 2363 to 2367. The USS Phoenix and Prometheus were constructed at 40 Radnier construction yards, Vulcan, and the USS Sutherland at San Francisco Fleet Yards. Some were produced at Utopia Planitia, Mars. In some Star Trek material, the Nebula class is stated as being able to commence saucer separation, similar to that of the Galaxy class. This has not been seen on screen. The Nebula class of ship has a crew accommodation of 750 officers and crew, with a room for 130 visiting personnel, and a massive 9,800 evacuation limit. They all have the same basic hull configuration, of a primary saucer mounted directly to the engineering section, but with downwardly angled nacelles. And the upper superstructure varies from an AWACS-style sensor dome to more sensory stuff, a triangular module carrying additional torpedo launchers, and another variant that comes with two additional yet smaller warp nacelles. Across their production period, their maximum warp ranged from 9.3 to warp 9.9. Depending on their upper superstructure, the overall length of the Nebula also varies from the largest at 465 meters, the quad nacelle variant in at 442 meters, and the wedge version a mere 0.23 meters longer than that. Standard on all Nebula ships are 8 Type 10 phaser arrays and 2 photon torpedo launchers, with of course more tubes in the doorstop module variant. The propulsion systems were built and supplied by the Yoyodyne Division, irrespective of the ship's place of construction. Then of course, there's the all-important deflector shields. The Nebula class has a maximum effective weapons range of just below 300,000 kilometers. A Nebula class configuration included the photon torpedo launchers being mounted on the secondary hull, above the deflector dish. On some variants of the class, another torpedo launcher was located on the superstructure above the primary hull. Some starships, notably the USS Phoenix, would perform a high-energy sensor sweep, cycling every 5.5 minutes. Between each cycle, a window of opportunity of a 15th of a second would open, requiring a realignment of the shields. The Nebula-class engines would need to operate with a mixture of above 90% to successfully leave orbit of a planet, initially topping out at warp 9.3 in 2368. By 2370, this was increased to 9.5, but when fine-tuned, could achieve 9.6, and then by 2374, the USS Bonchoon, at least, was capable of warp 9.9. Auxiliary craft carried by the Nebula class were a variety of Type 6 and Type 7 shuttles stored in the main hangar bay, as well as the smaller Type 15 shuttle pods. A visual inspection of the dorsal saucer suggests, like the Galaxy, there was also a captain's yacht. The interior design of the Nebula class did share some similarities with the Galaxy class Starship design, as was others within the second half of the 23rd century. In the case of the USS Sutherland, which Lieutenant Commander Data took command of, the bridge was rather small. However, the design either changed or was reconfigured when the Nebula-class USS Prometheus appeared on screen, showcasing a more open-plan bridge. Mission profiles for the Nebula-class ships varied from your everyday science and exploration roles to patrol and transport duties, such as aiding in the recovery of a surviving crew from the USS Enterprise D from the surface of Viridian 3. The USS Farragut was a Nebula class, which transported the crew of the Enterprise D off of Viridian 3. Benjamin Maxwell, one of the most highly regarded and finest captains in Starfleet, served as captain of the USS Phoenix in 2367. Maxwell was a fairly illustrious officer, well known for the protection of the survivors on Setlik 3, and the fierce loyalty of his crew during his command of the USS Rutledge, in the Federation Cardassian War of the 2340s. However, in 2367, he went rogue with his new command and began preemptively striking the Cardassians, believing them to be rearming and re-equipping, beginning with the destruction of the outpost in the Kular system, which Maxwell believed was a military supply port under the guise of a science outpost. He then decided to turn on any ship heading that way. The USS Phoenix proved the class survivability when it destroyed a supply ship and a Cardassian warship, killing over 650 Cardassians, despite those Cardassians being given the Phoenix's prefix codes to drop their shields. Ultimately, Maxwell was talked down from destroying another Cardassian supply vessel by his former tactical officer, whom we know better as the most important human ever, Miles O'Brien, leading him surrendering the Phoenix to his first officer. The USS Melbourne was one of the only Nebula classes shown canonically to have the additional 2 warp nacelles. Commanded by Admiral Hansen, it was part of a hastily assembled battle group of 40 ships to engage the Borg cube at the Battle of Wolf 359. The detail is considered retconned by the official Star Trek wiki, so this ship is currently unknown, but the design was at least there. On engaging the Borg, the fleet was decimated within minutes. Hansen gave the order to withdraw in an attempt to regroup the fleet, but the cube's devastating capabilities were, well, devastating. The USS Bellerophon, NCC 62048, was also a Nebula class among the ships destroyed alongside the Melbourne. In a Romulan holodeck simulation for Commander Riker, it was suggested that he had accepted a position to command the USS Melbourne, depicted by a model of a ship in the ready room of his new command, the USS Enterprise D. The USS Tecumseh, captained by Solok, who had an all-Vulcan crew, spent 6 months fighting on the front lines during the Dominion War. The ship visited Deep Space Nine for repairs and to get an overhaul and upgrades to her inertial dampeners. The USS Sutherland joined Captain Picard's fleet that blockaded the Klingon-Romulan border during the Klingon Civil War. It was prematurely deployed despite the superintendent's belief that the ship was not ready for launch. Experienced officers from the Enterprise D augmented the ship's staff, and temporary command was afforded Lieutenant Commander Data, being second officer and all. One of 23 assembled for the fleet and one of 17 chosen for the tachyon detection grid. USS Marc and Monitor were also Nebula-class ships assigned to the detection grid. During the blockade, the ships were hit with a massive tachyon pulse by the very Romulans they were attempting to find. Data disobeyed orders to regroup in Gamma Meridian and modify the ship's sensors to detect trace tachyons, and expose the warbird with low-yield torpedoes. The USS Sutherland was later assigned to the 9th Fleet near Bajor during the Dominion War, under the command of Captain Elizabeth Shelby. In 2365, Captain Will Thomas was a commanding officer of the USS Lexington, NCC 30405. Many new graduates from Starfleet Academy in 2369 considered the ship a plum assignment and fiercely competed for the position. Dr. Elizabeth Lenz, who graduated as a valedictorian from Starfleet Medical, was posted as Chief Medical Officer. Therefore, the Lexington embarked on an interstellar charting mission. In a virtual reality created by the founders in early 2371, Jadzia Dax was slated to be transferred to the Lexington as its new science officer. Later that year, the USS Lexington docked at Deep Space Nine following the completion of the interstellar charting. The Sutherland class design succeeded the Nebula class in the early 25th century. The Sutherland class featured a similar layout and design principle to the Nebula class, but easily demonstrated new technology and design choices, as was common for the dawn of the 25th century. However, the Nebula class would be remembered with the USS Lexington being preserved at the Fleet Museum at Anthem Prime. The Nebula class was prompted to be created by Rick Sternbach, but designed and built by Ed Marc. It never starred as the hero ship in Star Trek, but it is one of the modern fleet's most frequently used models. Over the years, it has featured in 3 series, until recently making it 4 in Picard's 3rd season and 2 movies, Generations and the aforementioned Star Trek First Contact. The model was updated, adapted and rebuilt over the years, as keen-eyed fans would notice that it appears different almost every time we see it on screen. It was only ever intended to be a background ship, and as a result, wasn't developed in the same way as the hero ships are. Before the use of CG, making new and modernised 24th century ships was a big and expensive deal. Wherever the VFX department could, they simply reused the existing USS Excelsior, Miranda and Oberth models. That came at the cost of implying Starfleet only had old ship designs lying around. It fell to Ed to come up with study models, specifically 24th century versions of the Excelsior and the Reliant, but he came with a number of other variations too. Marek went with building study models from commercially ready Starfleet model kits, as which were also used for the kit-bash ships of the graveyard scene in the Battle of Wolf 359. He built 2 near-identical examples of the class, which wasn't named yet and didn't have the superstructures like the Phoenix and the Sutherland, but the 2 extra mini nacelles we mentioned previously. One of the models is in Riker's future imperfect ready room, later part of a decor in Sisko's office on Star Trek Deep Space Nine. The other was damaged by Mike Okuda for the graveyard scene. There are 2 ships named USS Melbourne, NCC 62043, present at the Battle of Wolf 359. Initially a Nebula class, as stated a minute ago during the Next Generation point of view of the battle, However, during the opening of Star Trek Deep Space Nine, we see Lieutenant Commander Sisko escaping the USS Saratoga in the escape pod. The destroyed ship at the window is an Excelsior class, also said to be the USS Melbourne. Needless to say, neither ship of the name survived the fight. The USS Farragut, NCC 60597, appeared in the closing scene of Star Trek Generations, and it had an overhaul by ILM, changing its original white-blue, which matched the Galaxy class, to the blue-grey, and much more detail was painted on as well, including its new livery. The model made its final appearance as an initially unnamed Nebula in Star Trek First Contact, but has since been confirmed to be the USS Lexington. The CG model was made for Star Trek Voyager's Season 4 episode, Message in a Bottle, and named after a Foundation Imaging CG supervisor, Rob Bonchoon. Being pressed for time, he had to use the 3D model already built for the Galaxy class as reference, resulting in the CG version differing from the studio model just a bit, reverting it back to the white-blue colour scheme. Given its humble beginnings and the changes it underwent, the Nebula class has stood the test of time, being one of the most frequent starships we see in the Star Trek universe. Perhaps unsurprisingly, sets for the ships were all dependent on what they had access to at the time of filming. For example, the bridge of the Sutherland in The Next Generation differed greatly from the Prometheus in Deep Space Nine. The corridors for the USS Honshu, NCC 60205, were just reused from the USS Defiant and the brig from the USS Voyager. So what do you think of the Nebula-class Starship? Would you rather command this or something else? Feel like watching another Star Trek video? Click the link on the end screen now to discuss if Star Trek ruined the USS Enterprise F. What do you think? That's the end of this video. I've been Captain Jack in the Hangar Bay. Remember, if you're talking about science fiction, we want to hear about it.